Hello everyone, I was out the other day with the Fuji X-H2 and the X-T5, and since I have a copy of the 56 1.4 from Sigma and also the 56 1.2 WR from Fuji, I was like, man, I'm going to take these both out. I'm going to see what's up. We're going to find out like kind of how they work and if the Fuji is worth more than double the price of the Sigma, right? The Sigma I think is $400 and the Fuji's $1,000. So that's a pretty big difference. I think for the walk and the photos I've taken with both lenses, I think they're like comparable and they're fine for probably most people. But like in most things in photography, it's that small little percentage that's 8% at the top that's you paying double or sometimes triple and all that crazy money for. So I just yesterday, the first set of these, I just kind of went out and walked around with both cameras and shot. And so they're not perfect. They're not on a tripod. They're not scientific. I went in and I shot these in RAW, and then I applied the daylight settings to all of them. And most of the exposures and stuff like that are pretty consistent. The weather was pretty good for these, but I think you'll see that for the most part, they hold up well. One of the overall observations is that the Fuji renders a little bit warmer, so that was kind of pleasing. So this is from the 56 1.2, and this is at 1.4. And that's the 56 1.4 from Sigma at 1.4. If you go in and you look at both of these, I mean, they're pretty comparable, right? They look fairly similar. This is the 56 1.2, and you can look at some of the grain. This is shot at ISO 200. It's a little bit cooler on the Sigma right here, but I mean, everything else renders real well. Look at that from the 56 1.2. And that from the 56 1.4, you can see, right out of the camera, a little bit more contrast from the Fuji, a little tiny bit less from the Sigma. But I mean, overall, like the background and how everything looks is very similar. If we go in, and let's say we're going to fix this a little bit and make this a little bit warmer, just a touch, and kind of compare the two, we'll go to the comparison view, and let's put the 56 1.2 on the left, and then the 56 from Sigma on the right, and they're fairly comparable. My focus, I think it was in a different spot. It's harder to see on this one. Remember, these are not scientific, but I think from 100%, they look very similar. We'll call that one maybe a focus is a little bit off. Let's go to these. So we have, let's flip that, 56 on the left from Fuji. They're both 56s, and that's the one on Sigma 1.4, and you can definitely see a little bit more clarity and contrast and sharpness with the Fuji. But I got to ask you, is it worth the more than double the price? That's the biggest question. I went out and shot a lot with these things. Let's look at these two. Oops. So on the left is the 56 1.2. On the right is the Sigma. Something like that looks very close. The contrast is not quite the same, even though the exposure was pretty similar, I think. The exact same exposure in the same spot, moments away from each other. So the Fuji does look a little bit better. Let's go to where we stop down a little bit. So we got, the 1.2 on the left, and on the right is the Sigma, and this is at 5.6. Again, they look like really close. If you look at them farther away, you'll see that the Sigma is rendering a little bit cooler, but that's just, that's a pretty quick fix. If you're a JPEG shooter, this stuff might matter. And let's go to my son here, being my model, even though he hates it sometimes. The 1.2 is on the left. The 1.4 is on the right. Very similar. The angle of my son's just a little bit different, so it's not quite right. But if we go in and look at the eyeballs, the Sigma is just a slight soft compared to the 56 1.2. It's not that much softer, but you could definitely see more details in the eye and a little bit less in the Sigma. Overall, just a touch softer. One thing I did find out, once I was starting shooting near the sun, you could see a lot of difference in the flare that you get, like the ghosting and flare. So like the 56 1.2 was much more controlled than the 56 1.4 from Sigma. That's the 1.2. That is the Sigma. Quite a big, a huge difference, right? The The Sigma has a lot more problems when it's dealing with the sun. So that's the 1.2, and that's the 1.4. That's the 1.2, 1.4. Most of the time, it was hard to shoot a lot of shots with the Sigma without getting some kind of ghosting or flaring or some kind of problems. The 1.2 was a lot more controlled, so that was a big difference, especially for photographers who are shooting like portraits and stuff, and you're wanting to use the sun or some light sources to do some cool stuff. It might be a little bit of a challenge on the Sigma. Let's look at day 2. This is when I went out and I actually stuck some stuff on a tripod. This is the 56 1.2 at 1.4. If we zoom in, looks pretty good. And then we go over here, and it looks pretty good too. That's the Sigma. Not too bad. When we go to, let's go to look at this at 5.6. Zoom in. 5.6. It looks great. These things look good. Let's go to where we're actually shooting the same kind of deal. This is right now, that's the 56 1.2 at 1.4. And that looks decent, right? It's just, probably touch soft. And this is the same thing, 1.4. It's a little softer. If we go to comparison view, we'll see that the 56 1.2 is on the left right here. And then over here is the 56 1.4 from Sigma. And it's a little softer, not as much contrast, right? But is it worth the extra more than double the price? I'm not sure about that. And then I went and did a farther scene, and we could look at something like, let's see, that one's at f4. That's my backyard. And then something like this. That's the 56 1.2 on the left. That's the 56 1.4 on the right. If we zoom in on the porch, those are pretty close. Yeah, I mean, those are almost exactly the same. This is f4. So the difference definitely is not that dramatic when you're stopping down a little bit. The last thing I did is I went out and I tried to get some shots at the minimum focus distance to see what the cameras or the lenses would look like at minimum focus distance at like wider apertures. So what we see right here is the 56 1.2 at 1.4, the closest I could possibly focus it. And, it's a little tiny bit soft. Everything's a little softer when you're as close as it can get. And then a little softer on the Sigma. We'll go and look at, these two and that one. So this is the 56 1.2 on the left at 1.4, the 56 1.2 on the right, and they're pretty close. They're pretty similar. Definitely a little softer on the Sigma. These are all RAW files, so we're not getting any kind of in-camera, sharpening, just the defaults, whatever Lightroom Classic opens up with. And we'll look at one more set real quick. And I'm going to put these all below. The 56 1.2 is over here. The Sigma's on the right. That could be a little bit, maybe my focus was in a little bit of a different spot, but you can see it's a little softer overall generally throughout that. While the 1.2 has a little bit more sharpness and clarity. But is it worth the $600 difference, right? So I'm not sure. I think that a couple things came to mind is that manual focusing on the Sigma is a lot nicer, just smoother, and it's way better of an experience. The Fuji, this 56 1.2 kind of stutters on manual focusing. And then also the focus, like autofocus, seemed very similar on both cameras. The Sigma was quieter, which is kind of nice, but not that much quieter. The new 56 1.2 is pretty quiet. And mostly for me, I think the difference between the two is that the warmer colors, especially I like shooting JPEGs a lot, are a lot nicer on the 56 1.2. And then also you just get a lot more confidence that if you're going to shoot into some kind of light source like the sun or something like that, the 56 1.2 is going to control that quite a bit better. And I think that, though, that being said, $600 difference for people on a budget, you're going to get some good results out of that Sigma. I think it's pretty cool what they're able to do. And I think the 40 megapixels looks fine. You get a lot of detail. You're going to have to go in and sharpen things as usual, but that's kind of the way it is, I think, with this 40 megapixel sensor. I think it needs a little bit sharpening with the raw files. But other than that, I hope you get something out of this. Download the photos, mess with them, and see what you think. We'll see you next time.